Nintendo Switch 1 versus Nintendo Switch 2. Let's dive into the main differences. So anybody thinking about picking up a Nintendo Switch 2 on June 5th will probably be thinking about the differences between it and the Nintendo Switch 1 device. I just thought I'd use this time while I'm at the event, while I'm holding it, to go through some of the major differences between this and the original 2017 Nintendo Switch, as well as the OLED upgrade. So obviously one of the main differences between the original Nintendo Switch 1 and the Nintendo Switch 2 is the screen size. The original launch Nintendo Switch that released in 2017, this is an OLED by the way, so not exactly the model I'm talking about. It launched with a screen that was 6.2 inches. By comparison, the Nintendo Switch 2 has a bit of a bigger real estate, 7.9-inch screen, and what I will say is that you really feel the difference to it. It might not be an OLED like the mid-generation upgrade that experienced, when Metroid Dread released, but for the time being, I'd say that vivid LCD screen is doing pretty well out of the gate when the Nintendo Switch 2 is set to launch on June 5th. Whereas the original Nintendo Switch could only output at 720p in handheld mode and 1080p in docked mode, the Nintendo Switch 2 is very much an upgrade in these terms, outputting at 1080p with 60 FPS in some games, presumably most first-party games, whereas when you dock it, it actually upgrades to 4K quality with some games offering 120 FPS frame rate in performance mode. In terms of the other main differences with the Nintendo Switch, you're obviously going to notice the size of the unit. I've obviously already talked about the size of the screen itself, but if you just look here, you can see that the Nintendo Switch 2 is roughly about an inch or so longer than the original launch model Nintendo Switch, and indeed the OLED. So not a major difference there, but enough to feel like you're getting more bang for your buck with the Nintendo Switch 2. Interestingly though, while there is a difference in length, in terms of actual thickness, Nintendo has been very clear when saying that there's not actually that much of a difference, if at all. If you were to ask someone at Nintendo, they'd probably say that, yeah, the thickness, it's something that we wanted to get down to make this feel like, a handheld device that's comfortable, weighty, but yet, light enough to use comfortably for long periods of time. I'd say thickness is key to that, and you're actually going to get that here when it comes to the thickness of the Nintendo Switch 2. It's very similar to what you get with the OLED, with the original Nintendo Switch, and I'd say it's one of the biggest boons when it comes to the Nintendo Switch form factor. In terms of similarities, speaking of thickness with the Nintendo Switch 2, obviously you've got the game card port here, which again pops open at the top, simple enough. And the best thing about it is that Nintendo Switch 1 game cards and Nintendo Switch 2 game cards are going to be the exact same size, so you can fit it into the slot there, and just click it in, pop it in neatly and play. One of my biggest worries right now when it comes to the game cards though is how upgrades are being handled. Obviously, we now know that certain first-party Nintendo games like Super Mario Party Jamboree and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom will look and run better on Nintendo Switch. But I'm still wondering right now that if I were to pop a Nintendo Switch 1 game card in a Nintendo Switch 2, would I feel any benefits without having to pay the upgrade fee? My gut instinct is to say no, they're going to make you pay for that. 60 FPS Zelda exploring Hyrule and Tears of the Kingdom sounds pretty good to me, but it is going to come with an upgrade path. So yeah, while Nintendo Switch 1 games are definitely playable on the Nintendo Switch 2, you will have to pay a little bit extra in order to get more benefit, get more bang for your buck. Another major difference, obviously, which we've seen since the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal, is the amount of USB-C ports. The USB-C port here, which is used to power the Nintendo Switch 2 device, similar to a lot of other PC handheld devices out there like the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck, very, very standard these days. The original Nintendo Switch actually only came with one, but now you can see that the Nintendo Switch 2 actually comes with two USB-C ports, the second one coming on the spine, the top of the Nintendo Switch 2 device, and we now know that you can use that to plug in external first-party devices such as the Nintendo Switch 2 camera, which will be available at launch. So you get to charge your Switch, play it in docked mode or in handheld mode while using your Nintendo Switch 2 camera, and all is well. Another big difference, obviously, with the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the Nintendo Switch 1 is that it came with that really rickety kickstand when it launched in 2017. The OLED did a lot of work to sort of satisfy this and rectify it by providing a chunky kickstand that sort of covers the entire base area at the back of the Nintendo Switch. And I'd say the Nintendo Switch 2 is bringing the best of both worlds when it comes to those. Again, you've not got the weedy kickstand, it covers the base area of the Nintendo Switch 2, but I am a little bit concerned when it comes to sort of like the flimsy nature, because obviously it's not entirely covered this time around. Again, I think that's going to give you a lot more reliability when you want to play it in docked mode, or handheld mode rather, when you want to place it, break off the Joy-Con and play with some friends. Could it break? Is it a bit finicky? Potentially, we'll have to put it through its paces, but for the time being, it seems like a good middle ground. Another major difference is obviously how the Joy-Cons unlock from the Nintendo Switch. whereas the Nintendo Switch 1, you know, relied on this kind of like fairly unreliable slide and click design. Very iconic. It's what got the Nintendo Switch to, in effect, can he do it? Can he do it? Switch for the first time. By comparison, obviously, with the Nintendo Switch 2, it sort of like forgoes that sliding tactic in favor of steel magnets that it just simply unlock, pull apart, but still have that nice snap to them. And the way you go about doing that are these little latches on the back. I'd say it seems to be a major upgrade on what we saw before. Now, in terms of a bonus round of sorts, obviously PC handhelds are kind of like big business these days, and none more so have made an impact bigger than the Steam Deck from Valve. And you can just see when I hold these up just how big of a difference there is. They're obviously quite understated in their design, similar color, and I think it's fair to say that Nintendo has taken a few notes out of the Valve rulebook in terms when it comes to the black matte design. Definitely some similarities there to be found with the Steam Deck, but in terms of the form factor, the Steam Deck is a very bulky device. Even when I just turn them side by side, you can kind of see how much thinner the Nintendo Switch 2 is by comparison. And when you consider that this is outputting at 1080p in handheld mode, similar to what's possible with the Steam Deck, the Nintendo Switch is coming for Steam Deck's lunch, and hopefully Valve knows it. So there you have it, guys, in terms of comparisons between the Switch 1, Switch 2, and the Steam Deck as well. Those are the main differences for now. Generally speaking, the Nintendo Switch 2 is a big upgrade over the Nintendo Switch. It's not sort of a revolution of those ideas, but actually a kind of extension of those ideas. Obviously, this is Nintendo. You get your quirky kind of upgrades, such as the ability to detach the Joy-Con 2, use them as a mouse for games that offer that compatibility, but for the most part, the form factor, the design, we've still got the bevel back from the original Nintendo Switch in 2017. Not personally a big fan of that, especially when the Nintendo Switch OLED looks a lot slicker when removing that bezel, but for the most part, the new 7.9-inch screen sort of removes a lot of that worry. Still looks clean, still looks crisp.